Earlier this week, 50 foreign policy and national security officials, all of whom served in the Republican administrations, released a statement saying that the GOP nominee, Donald Trump, lacks the character, values, and experience to be president, and that he would be the most reckless president in American history. I'm now joined by one of the experts who signed that letter, Jendayi Frazer, former Special Assistant to the President for African Affairs, former Assistant Secretary of State as well. She joins us from Washington. What made you sign this?
Well, I found that I thought it was a responsibility of mine as a Republican, and he's the leader of our party now, basically, because of winning in the primaries. And there were really three things. One is his temperament. I've been in the Oval Office many times, and I've seen very serious and weighty issues that need to be decided there, and the power of that office and its impact on the world. And one of the things is that the decision maker is going to be presented with opposing views, and he has to be able to listen to his advisors and treat them with respect. And if anyone, what I found about Mr. Trump is that if you disagree with him, he belittles you. And that type of atmosphere within the Oval Office would actually curtail serious discussion and debate on very weighty issues. So that was part of the issue. Secondly is a question of moral leadership. How the American president has to project the values of our country, the values of our Constitution, and I would go on to say the values, if he's going to be a Republican president, of the party. And when you start talking about building walls to keep people out and banning Muslims, it undermines our engagement with the world. I was also ambassador in South Africa and Assistant Secretary of Africa. And when we go out to some of these countries and they start dealing with ethnic-based politics and excluding people on the basis of religion, we're always demarching them. We're always pressuring them to live up to more inclusive values, which will actually build society rather than tear it down. And so his approach undermines moral leadership. And then thirdly, I would say there's an issue of, the sort of, how would I call it, reality TV approach to very serious politics. I feel that he goes out to get ratings by saying very outrageous things. But as a president, you have to exercise much more prudence about what you say and how you speak. And he doesn't seem capable. And so I think that fundamentally it's a question of his temperament and whether it would be befitting someone who has the tremendous power of the presidency of the United States to exercise.
Who brought this group together?
Well, we've all been talking over the months, and the sort of catalyst was John Bellinger, who used to be the legal advisor at the National Security Council at the White House, and as well as a legal advisor at State Department. And John felt like, we're having these individual conversations, but we're not doing anything about it. And he said, why don't we put together this letter and have a collective voice? And I know that I actually hesitated at first because on the one hand, I'm not a politician. I'm a foreign policy expert, and you don't want to insert yourself into the political process, but I am a Republican, and it was hurting me every day to hear Donald Trump speak in the name of the Republican Party while betraying the ideals of that party. And I also was waiting for somebody else to step up and say something and do something. So when John approached me, I said, absolutely, I feel the same way as we said in the letter, and I signed.
Mr. Trump said that you are all nothing more than failed Washington elite looking to hold on to power, trying to be held accountable for your actions. How did you respond to that?
Well, I actually think it's more of the same, and it really speaks to the nature of the person and why we think he's not befitting to be president, because he goes on a personal attack. The fact that he did the same thing to the Khan family or anyone who challenges him, or if you're going to stand for the highest office, you have to be prepared to take criticism and not be so thin-skinned. And so he immediately goes on an attack, and I didn't expect anything differently from him. I'm not part of a Washington elite as such. I do have experience serving in government, and I think that that's also a question about Mr. Trump. How can he want to be the president and he's never even served in governance? He's never governed. And so to jump to the highest office, I doubt very seriously that he would allow anyone to be a CEO of any of his companies that had no business experience. He's very inexperienced, and he doesn't actually acknowledge that, learn from it, and have the humility to, approach people who are saying some very serious things to him, including Speaker Ryan. He'd sort of dismiss him. He dealt with the sort of petty political payback when, I think Congressman Ryan, when he hesitated to initially endorse him, he needed to really look at the guy's record. He's leading a political party. But Donald Trump is just quick and fast to just respond in a very thin-skinned fashion.
And Congressman Ryan was critical of him in his acceptance speech when he was when he won his primary. He didn't refer to him by name, but made a lot of criticism. What do you make of Trump's relationship with Putin?
Well, I also think that one has to question that. Russia has been a thorn in the side of the United States now for many years, and he's cozying up to Putin at the same time distancing himself from our NATO allies. That leads to undermining our foreign policy, a foreign policy that has been across Democratic and Republican administrations. And so, sure, I have no problem with trying to build and establish a relationship with nations and countries all over the world, but this idea that Putin himself is somebody that, America, certainly we need to do business with. But I question the way in which he's embracing him. And, now I hear that there may even be some former business ties there. But in any case, I do welcome any president trying to reach out and build mutually constructive relationships, but not to attack our NATO partners and cozy up to Putin. That seems to be to throw American foreign policy on its head.
Do you know if you or any of the other signees talked to President Bush before this letter?
Well, I certainly did not, and I'm not sure if the others did or did not. What I do know is that President Bush has said that he's not going to become involved in politics, and I've spoken to him about that in the past, now many years ago, not particularly this election cycle, and he felt that once he gets dragged in, he's in the mud. And so I think that he's honoring that. Obviously, he supported his brother, but other than that, he's really avoided politics.
Jendayi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Larry. It's an honor to be on your show.